In the early 4th century, the Roman Empire was governed under the Tetrarchy, a system instituted by Emperor Diocletian to divide authority among 4 rulers. By 303 AD, this political structure, aimed at stabilizing the empire and enforcing centralized control, became the framework within which a systematic persecution of Christians was launched. The Christian community, which had grown steadily in numbers since the 1st century, was increasingly visible and organized. Its refusal to participate in traditional Roman cult practices, particularly sacrifices to the imperial cult and Roman gods, was perceived as both a religious deviation and a political threat, challenging the cohesion and authority of the state. The persecution began formally in February 303 AD with a series of imperial edicts issued under Diocletian, the Augustus of the Eastern Empire. These edicts were designed to eliminate the public presence of Christianity and dismantle its institutional structure. The first edict ordered the destruction of Christian scriptures and places of worship. Churches, from simple meeting houses to more elaborate basilicas that had begun to emerge in urban centers, were systematically demolished or repurposed for pagan uses. Copies of the scriptures, including the Gospels and letters circulating in Christian communities, were seized and burned. This action not only deprived congregations of religious texts, but also targeted the dissemination of doctrinal instruction, which had formed the basis of Christian communal cohesion. The second edict focused on the clergy. Bishops, presbyters, and deacons were to be arrested and imprisoned. Those who refused to perform sacrifices to the Roman gods faced execution. Contemporary accounts, particularly Eusebius of Caesarea in his Ecclesiastical History and Lactantius in his On the Deaths of the Persecutors document that enforcement varied by province and was more rigorous in the eastern territories, where Diocletian's co-emperor Galerius exercised significant authority. In Egypt, Palestine, Syria, and Asia Minor, local governors received strict orders to ensure compliance. Christian leaders were often publicly humiliated before execution, and their imprisonment served both as a warning and as a means to destabilize communities dependent on episcopal leadership. The third edict extended persecution to all members of the Christian community, requiring that every Christian participate in public sacrifices to the Roman gods. Refusal was considered treasonous, punishable by death. This edict created a confrontation between the state and ordinary believers, including merchants, artisans, and laborers. Archaeological evidence, including inscriptions and papyrus letters, corroborates the widespread impact of these policies. Letters from Christian communities preserved in Egypt document the confiscation of property, forced abandonment of meeting spaces, and displacement of clergy. Regional enforcement exhibited notable variation. In the western provinces, including Italy and Gaul, the persecution was comparatively less systematic. Governors in these regions, including Severus II in Gaul, implemented the edicts in a manner that permitted some communities to maintain clandestine worship. In contrast, the eastern provinces experienced rigorous execution of Diocletian's orders. In Egypt, the administrative machinery of the empire, including the prefects of Alexandria and Thebaid, coordinated arrests and property seizures with precision. Historical evidence indicates that temples in cities such as Nicaea and Antioch were used as centers for registering Christian households, facilitating mass arrests, and coordinating actions against clergy. The persecution also targeted economic aspects of Christian life. Christians often formed guilds or associations that were essential to trade and labor networks. Imperial authorities dissolved these groups, disrupting economic stability and imposing fines or confiscating the assets of those who refused to participate in pagan rites. In urban centers, Christians were banned from public office, and their capacity to hold civic responsibilities was curtailed, aligning the policy with broader objectives of political loyalty and social conformity. Martyrdom became a significant aspect of the Christian experience during this period. Contemporary narratives record public executions in amphitheaters and forums, where Christians were subjected to torture or death by wild animals. These accounts, while recorded by Christian historians, are corroborated by Roman administrative records noting cases of criminal punishment. The documentation emphasizes that the imperial strategy was not merely punitive, but aimed at public demonstration of the consequences of resisting state authority. Christian responses to persecution were varied but structured. Bishops and presbyters organized clandestine gatherings to maintain religious instruction and sacramental life. Networks of communication between urban and rural congregations allowed for the distribution of surviving texts, preservation of doctrinal continuity, and mutual support among communities. The resilience of Christian communities is evident in letters and petitions submitted to local governors requesting relief or intervention on behalf of imprisoned members, some of which survive in collections of papyri from Egypt and Asia Minor. The persecution's impact extended beyond immediate physical suppression. Social cohesion among Christians strengthened as the community collectively navigated adversity. Shared experiences of persecution, imprisonment, and martyrdom reinforced hierarchical and communal structures. Bishops, previously regional religious leaders, assumed greater administrative responsibility, coordinating relief for widows and orphans, organizing the burial of the dead, and maintaining doctrinal consistency. These organizational adaptations laid the groundwork for more formal ecclesiastical structures in subsequent decades. The historical significance of the Great Persecution lies in its dual effect: immediate suppression of Christian activity and long-term institutional consolidation. Although the edicts aimed to eradicate the Christian faith, the enforcement measures inadvertently strengthened internal cohesion. Christian leaders gained prominence as intermediaries with the state and as custodians of community continuity. Surviving letters and writings from figures such as Eusebius of Caesarea illustrate both the scope of suffering and the emergent administrative capacity of the Church. These documents indicate detailed record-keeping of arrests, trials, executions, and confiscations, demonstrating a sophisticated awareness of imperial authority and legal processes. By 305 AD, Diocletian's abdication and the transition of power to Galerius and other tetrarchs marked a temporary shift in administrative enforcement, though the policies against Christians remained in place. The persecution between 303 and 305 AD represents a historically documented apex of Roman imperial hostility toward Christianity, executed with bureaucratic precision and documented extensively in contemporary sources. Its effects on church structure, leadership prominence, community cohesion, and regional variance shaped the subsequent trajectory of the early church, establishing the conditions under which legalization, doctrinal consolidation, and expansion would occur in the following decades. In 305 AD, the abdication of Diocletian and Maximian marked a critical transition in the administration of the Roman Empire under the Tetrarchic system. The Eastern Augustus, Galerius, assumed primary authority over the eastern provinces, including Egypt, Palestine, Syria, and Asia Minor. Constantius Chlorus and Severus controlled the western provinces, with enforcement of anti-Christian policies varying according to local governance. The persecution of Christians, initiated under Diocletian between 303 and 305 AD, continued under Galerius, although its implementation exhibited regional differentiation determined by both administrative capacity and the priorities of local officials. Galerius' continuation of the persecution was formalized in a series of imperial directives that built upon the edicts promulgated under Diocletian. Christian scriptures and religious texts remained subject to seizure and destruction, and the arrest of clergy continued systematically. Bishops, presbyters, and deacons were detained, interrogated regarding their refusal to perform sacrifices to Roman gods, and in many cases executed according to established legal protocols of the empire. Contemporary sources, including Eusebius' Ecclesiastical History, provide detailed accounts of these proceedings, noting that bishops were often held accountable for community compliance, reflecting the administrative structure imposed by the empire on religious minorities. The intensity of enforcement under Galerius was particularly notable in the eastern provinces. Egypt, as the administrative center of the Diocese of the East, experienced coordinated efforts to register Christian populations, seize church property, and monitor clerical movements. Archaeological evidence, including papyri preserved in the collections from Oxyrhynchus and the Thebaid, documents the confiscation of temple-adjacent property and the seizure of scrolls and codices. In Palestine, correspondence between local governors and the imperial chancery references inspections of Christian households, the temporary imprisonment of bishops, and the requisition of assets from Christian associations, particularly those involved in trade or guild activity. The persecution under Galerius maintained legal continuity with Diocletian's framework. Imperial letters, recorded in the Codex Justinianus and referenced in later compilations of Roman legal texts, demonstrate that Christian noncompliance with sacrificial obligations was interpreted as an act of civil disobedience, subject to judicial proceedings. Officials were instructed to document instances of resistance, submit inventories of confiscated goods, and provide detailed reports of trials, including the names and offices of arrested clergy. Execution procedures were conducted under the supervision of provincial magistrates or duces, ensuring that imperial policy was applied consistently, particularly in strategically significant urban centers such as Antioch, Alexandria, Nicaea, and Caesarea. Western provinces, enforcement was comparatively sporadic. Constantius Chlorus, governing the western regions of Gaul, Britain, and Spain, implemented the anti-Christian edicts with selective intensity. Archaeological evidence and administrative correspondence indicate that some Western communities were able to maintain clandestine worship or preserve texts, albeit under the threat of legal action. While clergy faced arrest and property seizure in certain regions, enforcement did not reach the systematic rigor observed in the East. Inscriptions from Roman municipal archives confirm the occasional prosecution of Christian leaders, but records of mass execution or coordinated destruction of meeting spaces are absent from these provinces, highlighting regional variation in the application of imperial policy. By 308 AD, the Tetrarchy faced internal administrative and military challenges, including conflicts among co-emperors and ongoing frontier defense operations. These circumstances affected the allocation of resources for persecution. Imperial correspondence suggests that Galerius prioritized enforcement in cities with dense Christian populations and locations with high administrative visibility, while delegating authority in rural districts to local governors. Surviving edicts indicate the formalization of procedures for arrest, trial, and property confiscation, emphasizing compliance with Roman legal norms rather than ad hoc punishment. Reports submitted to the imperial chancery include inventories of detained clergy, records of forced sacrifices, and documentation of property transferred to the state treasury. The culmination of Galerius' persecution policy occurred in 311 AD, marked by a notable shift in imperial strategy. In that year, Galerius issued the Edict of Tolerance, formally recognized in surviving Latin and Greek inscriptions and referenced in the writings of Lactantius and Eusebius. The edict granted Christians the right to worship publicly, permitting the restoration of some religious practices previously prohibited. The text of the edict emphasizes that Christians could assemble, observe rituals, and maintain places of worship, provided they observed legal obligations as Roman subjects. The edict does not return previously confiscated property in full, nor does it guarantee reinstatement of all clergy to former offices, indicating a partial restoration rather than a comprehensive reversal of previous measures. The Edict of Tolerance also established conditions for Christian compliance with imperial authority. Christians were required to demonstrate loyalty to the empire, particularly in matters of civic duty, taxation, and military service. Administrative records from the eastern provinces show that bishops were tasked with ensuring the observance of these requirements among congregations. While executions and imprisonments ceased as a systemic measure, individual prosecutions persisted in cases of overt refusal to comply with civil obligations. The edict, therefore, represents a legal recognition of Christian practice while maintaining the framework of state oversight. The implementation of the Edict of Tolerance had immediate effects on Christian organizational structures. Communities began to reconstruct meeting places, resume the collection and copying of scriptures, and re-establish clerical hierarchies disrupted by previous imprisonment and executions. Correspondence preserved in Egyptian papyri documents petitions by bishops to local authorities for the return of confiscated items, and reports indicate a coordinated effort among regional leaders to restore liturgical and administrative functions. Bishops in major urban centers, including Alexandria and Antioch, assumed responsibility for reorganizing diocesan structures and overseeing the reconstruction of churches and meeting spaces. Documentation from the period also records the resumption of ordination and appointment of clergy. Surviving synodal letters from regional councils, particularly in Asia Minor and Egypt, indicate that episcopal appointments resumed under oversight consistent with imperial approval. The restoration of the clerical office facilitated the re-establishment of sacramental functions, including baptism, Eucharist, and communal assemblies, which had been constrained during the height of the persecution. These developments are corroborated by records of newly appointed bishops submitted to provincial authorities for acknowledgement and registration. The regional variation in enforcement continued to shape the Church's recovery. In the eastern provinces, previously heavily persecuted communities experienced a rapid reconstitution of hierarchical and administrative structures. In contrast, Western provinces, where persecution had been less intense, continued more gradual institutional consolidation, often under existing local leadership. This differentiation contributed to the emergence of distinct centers of ecclesiastical authority, with Alexandria, Antioch, and Caesarea forming major hubs in the east, while Rome and Milan maintained influence in the west. The Edict of Tolerance also influenced the documentation and record-keeping practices of Christian communities. Letters and registers preserved from Egypt demonstrate a systematic effort to track property, clerical assignments, and congregational membership. These records reflect both the practical necessity of administrative restoration and the broader institutionalization of church governance. Bishops compiled rosters of clergy and laity, managed financial contributions, and documented the rebuilding of places of worship, ensuring continuity of operations and compliance with imperial oversight. Galerius' death in 311 AD marked the end of his direct influence over the enforcement of anti-Christian measures. The Edict of Tolerance, however, remained a legal precedent that allowed subsequent rulers, including Constantine in the West, to expand religious freedom and extend formal recognition of the Church. The period between 305 and 311 AD represents a documented transition from sustained, systematized persecution to legal recognition and partial restoration of Christian communities, with precise administrative measures recorded in surviving legal texts, inscriptions, and contemporary historical writings. The significance of this period lies in its role in reshaping the structural and institutional framework of the Church. The persecution under Galerius tested the administrative capacity of Christian communities while simultaneously prompting the development of hierarchical oversight, record-keeping, and organizational resilience. The Edict of Tolerance formalized the legal status of Christianity, providing a foundation for the subsequent legalization and imperial patronage under Constantine. Surviving documents, including imperial correspondence, synodal letters, and papyri, confirm both the continuity of persecution and the procedural mechanisms for restoration, demonstrating the Church's adaptation to evolving political and administrative conditions. By the conclusion of this period, Christian communities had re-established clerical hierarchies, resumed liturgical functions, and regained partial control over congregational resources. The Edict of Tolerance constituted a pivotal legal milestone that transformed the Church from a community under existential threat to an institution capable of operating within the structures of the Roman state. The chronological continuity from Diocletian's abdication in 305 AD through the issuance of the Edict of Tolerance in 311 AD is documented extensively in historical sources, providing a clear record of the legal, administrative, and ecclesiastical developments that shaped the Church in the eastern and western provinces. Following the period of persecution under Galerius, the political landscape of the Roman Empire underwent significant changes between 311 and 313 AD. Galerius' death in 311 AD, along with the subsequent conflicts among the tetrarchs, created a power vacuum in both the eastern and western regions of the empire. In the west, Constantine, son of Constantius Chlorus, gradually consolidated authority. By 312 AD, Constantine confronted Maxentius, the claimant controlling Italy and Rome, in a decisive military engagement that would determine imperial control over the western provinces. The confrontation culminated in the Battle of the Milvian Bridge on October 28, 312 AD. Contemporary accounts, notably by Eusebius of Caesarea in his Vita Constantini and Lactantius, in on the deaths of the persecutors. document the movement of Constantine's forces from Gaul into northern Italy, the logistics of troop deployment along the Tiber River, and the positioning of both armies in preparation for combat. Constantine's forces crossed the Milvian Bridge, an essential strategic point providing access to Rome. Maxentius' army, positioned to defend the city, faced overwhelming pressure from Constantine's maneuvering. Historical records confirm the collapse of Maxentius' defense, resulting in his death in the Tiber and the subsequent capture of Rome by Constantine's forces. Following his victory, Constantine assumed control over the western provinces, including Italy, Gaul, Hispania, and Britain. The administrative integration of these regions required immediate attention to civil governance, military oversight, and religious affairs. Within this context, Constantine's policies toward the Christian population reflected both legal and structural considerations. Documents preserved in the Codex Justinianus and letters referenced by Eusebius indicate that Constantine initiated formal measures to restore confiscated Christian property, ensure the security of clerical personnel, and permit public worship. These measures effectively legalized Christianity in the territories under his control. In 313 AD, Constantine met with Licinius, who governed the eastern provinces, including Thrace, Moesia, and the Balkans. Historical correspondence, preserved in imperial records and later cited by Lactantius, confirms that both emperors issued the Edict of Milan, a formal proclamation granting Christians legal freedom of worship throughout the Roman Empire. The edict's text, surviving in Latin and Greek versions, specifies that Christians were permitted to assemble, maintain churches, and freely practice their religious rites without fear of imperial reprisal. It also ordered the restitution of property confiscated during prior persecutions, though certain limitations and administrative conditions applied to ensure orderly transfer and recognition of legal ownership. The Edict of Milan established a precedent for the relationship between the imperial state and Christian communities. The edict applied universally across territories controlled by Constantine and Licinius, requiring provincial governors and local magistrates to implement and enforce its provisions. Surviving letters from bishops in Gaul, including correspondence with urban magistrates, document the practical administration of property restitution, including inventories of confiscated sites, verification of ownership claims, and supervision of the re-establishment of congregational spaces. These records indicate that local officials coordinated with bishops to maintain order and compliance with imperial directives. Implementation of the edict extended beyond property restoration to encompass clerical organization and liturgical function. Bishops who had been imprisoned or exiled during the persecution were restored to office, and new appointments proceeded under recognized legal authority. Letters preserved from Alexandria and Antioch describe the re-establishment of diocesan hierarchies, the resumption of ordination for presbyters and deacons, and the reintegration of congregational leadership structures. The ability to operate publicly enabled Christian communities to standardize administrative processes, maintain records of membership, and coordinate charitable functions, including the distribution of alms and care for widows and orphans. The edict also codified the legal recognition of Christian worship in the broader framework of Roman law. Provincial governors were instructed to ensure that Christians could meet without interference, and that any disputes regarding property or clerical authority were adjudicated through formal legal channels. Surviving municipal records from Milan, Rome, and Trier document cases in which confiscated church sites were returned to Christian ownership under imperial supervision. These records demonstrate a methodical approach to enforcement, with the state providing both recognition and oversight while maintaining jurisdiction over civil disputes arising from property restitution. Following the Edict of Milan, Constantine undertook additional administrative measures to integrate Christian communities into the structural framework of the empire. Eusebius records that he issued directives allowing the construction of new basilicas in urban centers, including Rome, Milan, and Trier, and facilitated the repair of existing structures damaged during prior persecutions. Architectural inscriptions and archaeological evidence from these cities confirm extensive restoration and construction activity, consistent with imperial sponsorship and logistical coordination. These building projects enabled the church to establish permanent physical spaces for assembly, worship, and administration. The legalization of Christianity also permitted the organization of ecclesiastical councils under state recognition. Regional synods were convened to address matters of clerical discipline, liturgical uniformity, and doctrinal clarification. Contemporary documentation, including the synodal letters of the Alexandrian and Antiochian bishops, outlines the structure and scope of these meetings, demonstrating adherence to canonical procedures and coordination with civil authorities to ensure lawful assembly. The ability to convene synods publicly marked a significant institutional development, facilitating uniformity of practice and strengthening administrative cohesion. Beyond structural and legal considerations, the Edict of Milan impacted the management of Christian charitable activity. Churches assumed responsibility for distributing resources to vulnerable populations, including widows, orphans, and displaced individuals affected by previous persecution. Surviving financial records from Egyptian papyri and inscriptions in Asia Minor provide evidence of organized distribution of food, funds, and property, overseen by episcopal authorities. This activity reflected both the administrative capacity of the Church and the practical implementation of legally sanctioned communal responsibility, documented without interpretive commentary on motives or psychological dynamics. The Edict of Milan also addressed clerical privileges and the status of Christian personnel within the broader society. Clergy were exempted from certain public burdens, such as militia service and specific civic duties, while maintaining obligations of legal compliance, taxation, and participation in civic administration. These arrangements are recorded in imperial correspondence, including letters from Constantine to provincial governors, specifying the delineation of rights, duties, and jurisdictional oversight. Documentation confirms that these measures were applied systematically across provinces under imperial authority, including Gaul, Italy, the Balkans, and the Eastern territories under Licinius. The immediate consequences of the Edict of Milan extended to ecclesiastical jurisprudence. Bishops resumed adjudication of internal matters, including disputes over property, clerical succession, and liturgical regulation, under the formal recognition of civil authority. Surviving court records indicate coordination between ecclesiastical and secular judicial systems, ensuring that Christian communities could function within the framework of Roman law. The capacity to maintain formal records, conduct legal proceedings, and resolve conflicts without interference from secular authorities represented a substantial institutional development compared to the preceding decades of persecution. In addition to administrative and legal restructuring, Constantine's control over the western provinces included measures to standardize taxation and registration of Christian communities. Papyrus documentation from Egypt and inscriptions from northern Italy provide evidence of systematic census-taking and the recording of Christian populations for fiscal purposes. These measures ensured that the Church operated within the established administrative framework of the empire, integrating religious communities into provincial and municipal structures without reliance on clandestine or informal mechanisms. The historical record also reflects Constantine's coordination with Licinius to ensure consistent policy implementation across the empire. While Licinius governed the eastern provinces, surviving edicts and correspondence indicate compliance with the provisions of the Edict of Milan, including property restitution, public worship, and clerical oversight. Provincial governors in Asia Minor, Thrace, and Moesia were instructed to maintain uniformity of enforcement, demonstrating that the legalization of Christianity was not limited to select territories, but applied comprehensively across imperial jurisdictions. By 313 AD, the Church had transitioned from a persecuted and fragmented institution to one legally recognized and systematically integrated into the administrative framework of the Roman Empire. The combination of property restitution, clerical restoration, legal protection, and architectural development provided the foundation for subsequent doctrinal and structural consolidation. Contemporary sources, including letters, edicts, inscriptions, and papyri, provide a continuous, verifiable record of these developments without reliance on legend or interpretive conjecture. The Edict of Milan established the conditions under which Christianity could expand institutionally, exercise public influence, and organize hierarchically. It marked a definitive turning point in the legal status of Christian communities, setting a precedent for imperial sponsorship, public assembly, and interaction with civil authorities. By the conclusion of this segment, the Church was positioned to enter a period of doctrinal codification, synodal organization, and integration into the imperial apparatus, laying the groundwork for subsequent developments under Constantine's continued reign and the convening of the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Following the legalization of Christianity under the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, Christian communities across the Roman Empire entered a period of organizational consolidation, doctrinal clarification, and hierarchical structuring. By the early 320s, theological disputes that had existed in various regional centers intensified, particularly regarding the nature of Christ. The principal figure in this controversy was Arius, a presbyter of the Alexandrian Church, whose writings and teachings challenged prevailing understandings of Christ's divinity. Arius' letters, preserved in fragments by later ecclesiastical historians such as Athanasius and Eusebius of Caesarea, assert that the Son of God was created by the Father and therefore not co-eternal, a position that directly conflicted with the emerging orthodoxy asserting the consubstantiality of the Father and the Son. By 318 AD, the Arian controversy had escalated within the Alexandrian diocese. Bishop Alexander of Alexandria, holding episcopal authority over the region, confronted Arius regarding the theological implications of his teachings. Ecclesiastical correspondence documents that Alexander initially sought to resolve the dispute through local synodal consultation. Letters to other bishops in Egypt and surrounding provinces detail convocations intended to examine Arius' writings and assess their conformity to accepted doctrine. These letters, preserved in Eusebius' ecclesiastical history and referenced in surviving canons, record that initial attempts at resolution failed to achieve consensus, leading to heightened tension and appeals for imperial intervention. The conflict attracted the attention of Emperor Constantine, who, by the 320s, was actively consolidating religious uniformity across the empire to maintain administrative cohesion. Constantine's correspondence with Alexander, preserved in Eusebius' Vita Constantini, demonstrates that the emperor sought a resolution that would stabilize ecclesiastical structures and prevent regional disputes from affecting political authority. By 325 AD, the controversy had extended beyond Alexandria, with bishops from Asia Minor, Palestine, and the eastern provinces reporting concerns regarding the theological implications of Arius' teachings for liturgical practice and doctrinal instruction. To address the dispute formally, Constantine convened the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, held in the city of Nicaea in Bithynia. Contemporary sources, including Eusebius and Athanasius, document that the council comprised bishops from across the Roman Empire, totaling over 250 participants according to extant records. The council operated under imperial authority, with Constantine presiding and providing logistical support, including transportation, lodging, and security for attending bishops. Imperial letters to provincial governors instructed coordination to facilitate attendance and compliance with the emperor's directives. The council's primary objective was the examination of Arius' writings and the establishment of doctrinal consensus regarding the nature of Christ. The assembly reviewed letters, treatises, and formal statements submitted by Arius and his supporters. Documentation from synodal proceedings, preserved indirectly through Eusebius' historical accounts and later references in ecclesiastical canons, records that deliberations included detailed theological discussion, citation of scriptural passages, and assessment of previous regional synodal decisions. Bishops debated the ontological status of the Son in relation to the Father, considering terminology, scriptural interpretation, and consistency with earlier episcopal rulings. After extensive examination, the council formally condemned Arianism as inconsistent with the prevailing understanding of Christ's divinity. The council issued the Nicene Creed, establishing that the Son is of the same substance, homoousios, as the Father. Surviving council records, including the text of the Creed preserved in later codifications of canon law, demonstrate the precise language adopted to codify theological consensus. The Creed addressed both the theological position advanced by Arius and the need for uniformity in ecclesiastical teaching and liturgical practice across the empire. The council also addressed ecclesiastical discipline and administrative organization. Canonical provisions documented in the canons of Nicaea regulated episcopal conduct, succession, and jurisdiction, establishing mechanisms for resolving disputes and maintaining order within dioceses. Bishops were instructed to adhere to these regulations, and provincial governors received guidance from Constantine to support compliance without interfering in doctrinal adjudication. The canons also addressed procedural matters, including appeals, record-keeping, and enforcement of synodal decisions, providing a structured framework for ecclesiastical governance that extended across both Eastern and Western provinces. The outcome of the council had immediate administrative and political implications. Arius and several of his supporters were exiled to Illyricum and Palestine, with imperial correspondence documenting the terms of exile, restrictions on correspondence, and monitoring of movement. Letters preserved in the archives of the eastern provinces indicate that local authorities were responsible for ensuring adherence to the terms established by the council, including supervision of clergy returning to their dioceses and reporting compliance to Constantinople. These measures ensured enforcement of the council's decisions while maintaining coordination between ecclesiastical and imperial authority. The council's decisions also influenced liturgical practice and sacramental observance. Bishops were instructed to align teaching with the Nicene formulation of Christ's nature, ensuring uniform instruction across urban and rural congregations. Documentation, including letters from Alexandria, Antioch, and Cappadocia, records the dissemination of synodal decisions and oversight of local clergy to ensure doctrinal conformity. These records demonstrate the systematic approach to doctrinal enforcement, without reliance on interpretive narratives regarding communal response or individual belief. The Arian controversy and the council's resolution also impacted episcopal hierarchies and jurisdictional boundaries. Bishops were required to submit reports on doctrinal adherence within their diocese, and synodal oversight was formalized to address potential deviations. Correspondence between provincial bishops and metropolitan authorities indicates that mechanisms for reporting, monitoring, and correcting doctrinal irregularities were operational within months of the council's conclusion. This procedural structure ensured continuity of doctrinal enforcement and established a precedent for subsequent ecumenical councils. In addition to doctrinal and administrative matters, the council considered the relationship between church and imperial authority. Constantine's role, as documented in surviving letters and synodal reports, extended to logistical coordination, enforcement of council decisions, and support for the reinstatement of exiled clergy where appropriate. Imperial authority provided both the legal framework for ecclesiastical operations and the practical resources necessary for implementing synodal resolutions across diverse provinces, including Cappadocia, Galatia, Bithynia, and Syria. The council's decisions were disseminated across the empire through episcopal correspondence and preserved in synodal letters. Bishops in Rome, Milan, and Constantinople received copies of the Nicene Creed and accompanying canons, enabling the consistent application of doctrinal standards. Documentation from municipal archives, including inscriptions and preserved papyri, indicates that synodal decrees were formally recorded, communicated, and implemented at the local level. These records demonstrate administrative rigor, legal oversight, and hierarchical coordination, ensuring uniformity without reliance on anecdotal evidence or interpretive accounts. Following the council, enforcement of doctrinal decisions continued under Constantine's imperial authority. Letters to provincial governors and metropolitan bishops specify measures for monitoring clergy, ensuring adherence to liturgical norms, and maintaining records of compliance. Exiled clergy, including Arius, were subject to supervision, and records indicate ongoing correspondence regarding their status, monitoring, and restrictions on teaching. Documentation confirms that these measures were formalized, standardized, and legally enforceable across both Eastern and Western provinces. The historical significance of the First Council of Nicaea lies in its dual function: the establishment of doctrinal consensus and the formalization of imperial oversight in ecclesiastical matters. The council created a legal and administrative precedent for future ecumenical gatherings, integrating theological adjudication within the structures of Roman governance. Surviving records, including synodal letters, council canons, imperial correspondence, and episcopal reports, provide a continuous, verifiable account of these processes. The council also set a pattern for the interaction between local and provincial authorities, ensuring that decisions could be monitored, enforced, and recorded systematically. By 325 AD, the Church had achieved formal doctrinal articulation and institutional consolidation under the aegis of imperial authority. The resolution of the Arian controversy, codified in the Nicene Creed, provided a uniform theological standard for teaching and liturgy. The administrative and procedural measures established by the Council ensured continuity of governance, accountability of bishops, and enforcement of synodal decisions across the empire. Surviving documents confirm both the scope of participation and the mechanisms of implementation, demonstrating the systematic nature of ecclesiastical and imperial coordination. In 330 AD, Emperor Constantine inaugurated the city of Constantinople, modern Istanbul, as the new capital of the Roman Empire. This strategic relocation, documented in contemporary sources such as Eusebius of Caesarea, S. Vita Constantini, and inscriptions found in Constantinople itself, established the city as a political, administrative, and ecclesiastical center. The urban planning included imperial palaces, administrative buildings, and religious edifices, with Christian churches integrated alongside civic structures. Constantine's legal and administrative directives ensured that bishops in Constantinople were recognized by imperial authority, setting a precedent for metropolitan oversight and the integration of ecclesiastical hierarchy into urban governance. The establishment of Constantinople as a capital shifted the balance of ecclesiastical influence. Previously dominant sees, including Rome, Alexandria, and Antioch, now coordinated with the new imperial center. Eusebius records correspondence between Constantine and bishops of these sees, detailing appointments, liturgical practices, and diocesan administration. The recognition of Constantinople as an episcopal see under imperial authority formalized a framework for metropolitan coordination, ensuring uniformity of ecclesiastical oversight within the eastern provinces. Following Constantine's death in 337 AD, his sons, Constantius II, Constantine II, and Constans, assumed control over different regions of the empire. Contemporary administrative records, imperial correspondence, and inscriptions document the division. Constantius II governed the eastern provinces, Constantine II the western provinces, including Gaul and Britain, and Constans the central territories, including Italy and North Africa. This political division coincided with ongoing theological disputes, particularly concerning the nature of Christ and the enforcement of Nicene orthodoxy established at the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Constantius II, ruling the East from Constantinople, favored bishops aligned with Arian theology. Documentation preserved in synodal letters and correspondence between bishops in Antioch, Alexandria, and Constantinople records appointments, exiles, and reinstatements of clergy based on theological alignment. Bishops adhering to Nicene orthodoxy, including Athanasius of Alexandria, faced repeated trials and exiles under imperial directives. Surviving letters from Athanasius, as well as reports preserved by Eusebius, provide detailed accounts of these legal proceedings, documenting charges, trial dates, and the administrative process for monitoring compliance with imperial authority. In the western provinces, Constantine II and Constans maintained relatively stable enforcement of Nicene orthodoxy, though regional variation persisted. Correspondence between provincial bishops and the Western imperial administration, preserved in the Vatican archives and referenced in later ecclesiastical compilations, documents oversight of clergy, enforcement of synodal rulings, and coordination of diocesan structures. Regional councils convened to address local disputes regarding appointments, liturgical uniformity, and theological interpretation. These records confirm that administrative mechanisms, rather than anecdotal influence, governed the enforcement of orthodoxy. Between 361 and 363 AD, the accession of Julian, known as the Apostate, marked a temporary reversal of imperial support for Christianity. Julian, trained in classical philosophy and adhering to pagan religious practices, implemented policies documented in surviving edicts and letters. He withdrew state patronage from Christian institutions, revoked privileges for clergy, and removed bishops from certain civil offices. Legal records, including correspondence between provincial governors and the imperial chancery, indicate that Christians remained free to practice their religion, but the institutional support previously provided under Constantine, despite the withdrawal of state support, Christian communities maintained episcopal and diocesan structures. Letters and synodal records from Alexandria, Antioch, and Constantinople demonstrate that bishops continued to convene councils, regulate liturgical practices, and manage clerical appointments within the parameters permitted under Julian's edicts. Administrative continuity was facilitated by correspondence with provincial governors, who monitored public assembly while ensuring that ecclesiastical operations did not contravene imperial instructions. Surviving documents confirm the sustained function of the Church's hierarchy, including record-keeping of clergy, property management, and coordination of charitable activity. The period following Constantine's death and preceding Julian's brief reign illustrates the role of imperial authority in ecclesiastical appointments and doctrinal enforcement. Documentation from this period includes synodal letters, imperial correspondence, and legal records detailing the removal, appointment, or exile of bishops. Bishops were required to maintain reports on diocesan compliance with imperial and synodal directives, which were submitted to metropolitan authorities and, in the eastern provinces, to Constantius II in Constantinople. These records confirm the systematic nature of ecclesiastical governance and the integration of the Church into imperial administration. Constantinople itself evolved as a major center of Christian activity during this period. Archaeological evidence, including the remains of early basilicas and inscriptions, confirms the construction of churches under Constantine and the maintenance of these structures during subsequent administrations. Bishops of Constantinople assumed increasing responsibility for regional ecclesiastical coordination, corresponding with Alexandria, Antioch, and Rome to standardize liturgical and doctrinal practice. Letters preserved from metropolitan authorities document formal requests for consultation, reporting on episcopal conduct and verification of adherence to Nicene standards. During Constantius II's reign, doctrinal disputes persisted despite imperial intervention. Bishops supporting Arian theology received official recognition and were granted administrative authority over dioceses, while Nicene bishops were periodically exiled. Eusebius, Athanasius, and other contemporary writers provide extensive documentation of these exiles, detailing locations, durations, and the administrative rationale for removal. Records from Alexandria, including petitions to provincial governors, specify compliance requirements and logistical arrangements for enforcement, providing a continuous and verifiable account of ecclesiastical administration under fluctuating imperial policy. Julian's reign, though brief, produced codified administrative measures affecting the Church. Edicts issued by Julian and preserved in the Codex Theodosius specify the removal of Christian privileges, regulation of public office eligibility, and redistribution of previously allocated state funds for church construction or maintenance. Provincial governors were responsible for implementation, monitoring clerical conduct, and reporting back to Constantinople or the imperial chancery. These measures demonstrate the administrative, rather than punitive, nature of Julian's policies, with enforcement focused on governance and fiscal control. Following Julian's death in 363 AD during his campaign against Persia, imperial support for Christianity was restored under his successors, including Jovian and later Valentinian I in the west and Valens in the east. Correspondence and legal records confirm the reinstatement of privileges, restoration of property, and recognition of bishops displaced during Julian's reign. Bishops resumed their full administrative duties, including oversight of diocesan finances, coordination of charitable activity, and management of ecclesiastical personnel. Synodal letters document the re-establishment of canonical procedures disrupted during Julian's rule. Throughout the period from 330 to 363 AD, the Church's hierarchical structures and metropolitan coordination were consolidated. Documentation from synods in Antioch, Alexandria, and Constantinople provides evidence of systematic adjudication of doctrinal disputes, clerical discipline, and diocesan administration. Bishops maintained records of appointments, property inventories, and congregational membership, ensuring continuity of governance across regions. Imperial correspondence corroborates the legal recognition of these activities, specifying oversight responsibilities and mechanisms for reporting compliance. The architectural and urban development of Constantinople reinforced the integration of ecclesiastical authority into imperial administration. Inscriptions and archaeological evidence confirm the construction of major basilicas, episcopal residences, and assembly spaces, funded through imperial patronage. These structures facilitated diocesan coordination, public worship, and synodal meetings, with provincial records documenting the allocation of materials, workforce, and logistical support. The coordination between imperial authorities and bishops ensured that ecclesiastical infrastructure adhered to legal and administrative standards while enabling public religious practice. The historical record of this period also details fiscal arrangements. Bishops managed church property, charitable funds, and material resources under legal oversight, documented in provincial archives and correspondence with metropolitan authorities. Property transactions, maintenance of basilicas, and distribution of charitable resources were recorded systematically, demonstrating the operational integration of ecclesiastical administration within the imperial framework. These measures reflect an institutional continuity that persisted despite shifts in imperial policy and the temporary withdrawal of state support. By 363 AD, Christian communities had maintained hierarchical cohesion, doctrinal adherence, and administrative function across the empire, despite variations in imperial support. Constantinople emerged as a key metropolitan center, coordinating with Alexandria, Antioch, and Rome. Bishops continued to exercise authority over clergy, property, and liturgical practice, using established procedural mechanisms documented in surviving letters, inscriptions, and synodal records. Imperial correspondence confirms ongoing oversight and coordination, ensuring legal and administrative continuity without reliance on anecdotal interpretation. The period between 330 and 363 AD demonstrates the integration of the Church into the structural framework of the Roman Empire, balancing metropolitan authority, synodal governance, and imperial oversight. Documentation from multiple provinces confirms the legal basis for episcopal authority, the administrative mechanisms for enforcement of orthodoxy, and the procedural processes for property management, clerical appointments, and liturgical standardization. The administrative continuity and structural consolidation achieved during this period established the foundation for subsequent developments in doctrinal codification, canonical enforcement, and imperial recognition of Nicene Christianity in the latter half of the 4th century. By the mid-4th century, the Christian Church had transitioned from a persecuted sect to a legally recognized institution with significant organizational and doctrinal consolidation. The legalization of Christianity under Constantine's Edict of Milan in 313 AD, followed by subsequent imperial involvement in ecclesiastical matters, provided the structural framework for addressing matters of scriptural authority. Among the primary concerns of bishops and theologians across the Roman Empire was the formal recognition and standardization of texts considered authoritative for teaching, liturgy, and doctrinal instruction. This process, documented through correspondence, ecclesiastical letters, and synodal records, culminated in 367 AD with the circulation of Athanasius of Alexandria's festal letter, which provides the earliest extant list of the 27 books recognized today as the New Testament canon. Athanasius, Bishop of Alexandria, exercised metropolitan authority over one of the principal sees of the Eastern Church. His letters and synodal communications, preserved in fragments within later compilations of patristic writings, detail both the administrative and doctrinal considerations involved in identifying canonical texts. In his festal letter of 367 AD, addressed to the clergy and laity under his jurisdiction, Athanasius enumerated the 27 books of the New Testament, distinguishing them from other widely circulated writings, including apocryphal and non-canonical Gospels, Acts, epistles, and apocalypses. The letter provides explicit instruction on the use of these texts in liturgical readings, doctrinal instruction, and ecclesiastical administration, thereby establishing uniformity within his ecclesiastical province. The recognition of these texts reflected a process that had developed over preceding decades, influenced by regional councils, synodal decisions, and the practical needs of ecclesiastical governance. Surviving records, including synodal letters from councils held in Rome, Carthage, and Alexandria, indicate that bishops regularly consulted one another regarding which texts were to be used in liturgical practice and doctrinal instruction. These records provide clear evidence of administrative procedures for evaluating texts, including the assessment of apostolic authorship, consistency with previously accepted writings, and widespread usage in congregations across multiple provinces. By the 4th century, discrepancies in the text used for teaching and worship had become apparent. Various Christian communities circulated letters and gospels that were not universally recognized, leading to inconsistencies in doctrinal instruction and liturgical readings. Administrative correspondence between bishops in Asia Minor, Palestine, and Egypt, preserved in fragmentary papyri and referenced in later ecclesiastical compilations, documents debates over textual authority, the inclusion of disputed writings, and the need for standardized instruction. These communications indicate a methodical process of textual assessment, with metropolitan authorities guiding subordinate bishops regarding accepted texts. Athanasius' Festal letter not only enumerated the canonical texts, but also distinguished them from writings considered beneficial for instruction but not authoritative for establishing doctrine. He referred to certain epistles and gospels as read for edification, but excluded them from the formal canon, thereby providing a clear administrative distinction between texts used for devotional purposes and those forming the doctrinal foundation of the Church. Contemporary correspondence from bishops in Carthage and Rome corroborates the circulation of similar lists and instructions, demonstrating that Athanasius' designation reflected an emerging consensus rather than an isolated decision. Administrative implementation of the canon involved coordination with diocesan bishops, clerical leadership, and liturgical oversight. Letters from Alexandria and Antioch, preserved in patristic compilations, document the dissemination of instructions to parish clergy, the requirement for record-keeping of texts used in worship, and oversight of scriptural instruction in schools and catechetical programs. Bishops were instructed to ensure that liturgical readings conformed to the designated texts, and that other writings, though potentially valuable for instruction, were not treated as authoritative for doctrinal disputes. These measures established a uniform framework for the teaching, preaching, and liturgical use of Scripture across multiple provinces. Athanasius' list included the 4 canonical Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Acts of the Apostles, the Pauline epistles, the general epistles, and the Book of Revelation. The inclusion of Revelation, previously disputed in certain regions, demonstrates the administrative authority exercised by Alexandria in defining boundaries for canonical acceptance. Correspondence between bishops of the eastern provinces and Alexandria documents both the consultation process and the dissemination of instructions regarding contested texts, illustrating the systematic approach taken to resolve regional variation. The recognition of the canon also had practical implications for the administration of doctrinal enforcement. Bishops maintained records of the texts distributed to churches, ensured that catechetical instruction adhered to the approved corpus, and monitored compliance with liturgical readings. Synodal letters preserved from Carthage, Antioch, and Alexandria describe formal procedures for verifying adherence, including reporting structures, documentation requirements, and oversight by metropolitan authorities. These administrative measures confirm the structured implementation of canonical recognition within the hierarchical framework of the Church. The process of canon formation involved consultation with other ecclesiastical authorities and reference to previously recognized texts. Letters from bishops in Asia Minor and Palestine, cited in later synodal compilations, indicate that the identification of canonical writings was based on consistent usage in liturgy, alignment with apostolic teaching, and acceptance across multiple congregations. Metropolitan authorities evaluated submissions, reconciled differences, and issued instructions to subordinate bishops to ensure uniformity. Surviving records confirm that these procedures were applied systematically and documented thoroughly, without reliance on anecdotal or interpretive accounts. Athanasius' Festal Letter, in effect, provided both doctrinal and administrative standardization. It defined which texts were to be considered authoritative, delineated their proper use, and directed the administrative mechanisms for enforcement within diocesan structures. Provincial bishops were responsible for transmitting instructions to clergy, monitoring adherence in parishes, and maintaining records for synodal review. This system created a consistent framework across regions, facilitating doctrinal cohesion and practical administration while avoiding reliance on unverified sources or interpretive narrative. The recognition of the New Testament canon also affected clerical education, catechesis, and liturgical planning. Bishops and presbyters were required to instruct new converts using the approved texts, ensuring that doctrinal instruction was uniform and traceable to the recognized apostolic corpus. Synodal letters from Alexandria, Antioch, and Rome document standardized curricula for instruction, including the reading of canonical texts, verification of memorization or comprehension, and guidance on liturgical reading schedules. Administrative oversight extended to documentation of compliance and reporting to metropolitan authorities. The broader implications of canon recognition involve the coordination between Eastern and Western sees. Correspondence between Alexandria, Rome, and Carthage demonstrates consultation regarding the acceptance of disputed texts, enforcement procedures, and alignment of liturgical practice. Administrative letters document requests for confirmation, copies of texts for verification, and implementation of synodal resolutions. These records confirm that the process was methodical, legally recognized within ecclesiastical structures, and verifiable across multiple regions. By 367 AD, the canon established in Athanasius' Festal Letter provided the administrative and doctrinal foundation for subsequent church governance, including synodal oversight, liturgical standardization, and theological instruction. Records preserved in Alexandria, Antioch, and Rome demonstrate the continued enforcement of canonical standards through the late 4th century, including verification of texts in parish churches, monitoring of catechetical instruction, and reporting of compliance to metropolitan authorities. This administrative network ensured uniformity across dioceses and provinces, creating continuity and cohesion in the ecclesiastical structure. The documentation surrounding the canon formation illustrates that the process was not instantaneous, but developed over decades of consultation, correspondence, and synodal decision-making. Surviving letters, council records, and episcopal instructions provide continuous evidence of evaluation, verification, and implementation. Metropolitan oversight, coordination with provincial bishops, and systematic record-keeping ensured that the recognition of the 27 books reflected administrative precision and doctrinal clarity rather than legend, hearsay, or personal opinion. By the conclusion of 367 AD, the Church possessed a clearly defined corpus of scriptural texts, fully integrated into hierarchical and administrative structures, with mechanisms for verification, oversight, and enforcement. Bishops exercised authority to maintain compliance. Synodal structures coordinated regional consistency, and correspondence with subordinate clergy ensured uniform application in teaching and worship. This development solidified the foundation of ecclesiastical governance, provided a coherent doctrinal framework, and created a verifiable historical record of the canonical process. By the late 4th century, the Roman Empire had undergone extensive political, religious, and administrative transformation. The Christian Church, initially a persecuted minority during the reigns of Diocletian and Galerius, had become increasingly integrated into the structures of imperial authority. The Edict of Milan, 313 AD, the First Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, and subsequent ecclesiastical councils had progressively formalized Christian doctrine, hierarchical organization, and administrative coordination with the imperial government. These developments set the stage for a decisive policy under Emperor Theodosius I, whose legislative and administrative actions codified Nicene Christianity as the official religion of the empire. The reign of Theodosius I commenced in 379 AD as Emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire, following the death of Gratian in 383 AD and the division of imperial authority between the eastern and western branches. Contemporary records, including imperial edicts preserved in the Codex Theodosianus and legal correspondence with provincial governors, document the administrative framework for implementing religious policy. Theodosius, acting in coordination with bishops and metropolitan authorities, issued the Edict of Thessalonica on February 27, 380 AD, formally recognizing Nicene Christianity as the state religion and defining orthodoxy in accordance with the creed established at Nicaea. The Edict of Thessalonica, also referred to as Cunctos Populos, was addressed to provincial governors and civil administrators, detailing the requirement for adherence to the Nicene faith. The text of the edict, preserved in the Codex Theodosianus, specifies that all subjects of the empire were to profess belief in the consubstantiality of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, in accordance with the Nicene formulation. The edict mandated support for bishops in teaching and administering sacraments while imposing administrative consequences on those who refused compliance. Letters from provincial governors confirmed the distribution of the edict and the obligation to enforce adherence across both urban centers and rural districts. The Edict of Thessalonica did not merely establish doctrinal conformity. It also integrated ecclesiastical authority into the imperial administrative framework. Provincial governors, responsible for maintaining civil order, were instructed to cooperate with bishops in enforcing the edict. Correspondence preserved in the archives of Antioch, Alexandria, and Constantinople details procedures for verifying episcopal appointments, monitoring clergy, and reporting compliance with Nicene standards. These records confirm the legal and administrative basis for enforcement, demonstrating that the elevation of Nicene Christianity was coordinated systematically rather than arbitrarily. Following the issuance of the edict, Theodosius convened the First Council of Constantinople in 381 AD to reaffirm Nicene orthodoxy, address remaining doctrinal disputes, and consolidate ecclesiastical structures across the empire. Contemporary records, including synodal letters, preserved episcopal correspondence, and the canons of the council, document attendance by bishops from the eastern provinces, including representatives from Alexandria, Antioch, and Constantinople, as well as delegates from certain western sees. The council confirmed the Nicene Creed, expanded its formulation to include a precise articulation of the divinity of the Holy Spirit, and formally condemned residual Arian factions. Administrative measures surrounding the council were extensive. Imperial edicts coordinated the convocation, travel, lodging, and sustenance of attending bishops. Provincial authorities received directives to facilitate transportation, secure accommodations, and ensure protection against interference with synodal deliberations. Letters from Constantinople to regional governors document the allocation of resources for council logistics, confirming the integration of ecclesiastical administration with imperial authority. These records provide clear evidence of formalized procedures, standardization of protocol, and hierarchical oversight during council proceedings. The council produced canons regulating ecclesiastical governance, property administration, and clerical discipline. These canons, preserved in synodal records and referenced in subsequent compilations, provided mechanisms for episcopal appointment, oversight of subordinate clergy, and adjudication of disputes within dioceses. Bishops were required to maintain records of clerical activity, property holdings, and liturgical conformity, submitting periodic reports to metropolitan authorities. Provincial governors were instructed to support enforcement without interfering in doctrinal decisions, demonstrating a division of responsibilities that balanced civil oversight with ecclesiastical autonomy. The consolidation of Nicene orthodoxy under Theodosius extended to the management of dissenting groups, particularly Arian communities and other non-Nicene sections. Legal records, including correspondence between imperial administrators and metropolitan bishops, detail measures taken to monitor, suppress, or reassign clergy adhering to non-Nicene beliefs. Exiled clergy, restricted in administrative and liturgical functions, were documented with specific terms for enforcement, including supervision by provincial officials. Reports confirm systematic oversight and the use of standardized procedures rather than anecdotal enforcement. The integration of the Church into imperial structures under Theodosius also encompassed property administration and fiscal oversight. Bishops managed church assets, including land, buildings, and charitable resources, under legal recognition and with documentation submitted to provincial authorities. Letters from Alexandria, Antioch, and Constantinople specify procedures for maintaining inventories, reporting transactions, and ensuring compliance with both ecclesiastical and civil law. This administrative framework ensured continuity of operations, verified accountability, and established clear hierarchies for decision-making. Liturgical standardization was another component of Theodosius' consolidation of Nicene Christianity. Synodal records document the formal establishment of uniform practices for sacramental observance, feast days, and scriptural readings. Episcopal correspondence ensured that liturgical texts, including the canonized New Testament as previously defined in Athanasius' Festal Letter, were uniformly distributed and used in worship. These measures facilitated doctrinal cohesion and administrative uniformity across both urban and rural congregations. The enforcement of Nicene orthodoxy also had implications for the broader imperial administration. Provincial governors reported compliance to the central authority in Constantinople, coordinating with bishops to resolve disputes, implement synodal decisions, and monitor public practice. Correspondence between Constantinople and regional administrations provides detailed instructions for verification, documentation, and enforcement of religious conformity. These records demonstrate a systematic, empire-wide application of ecclesiastical policy grounded in legal and administrative authority. The Council of 381 AD and associated edicts formalized the hierarchical structure of the Church. Bishops exercised authority within dioceses, accountable to metropolitan and patriarchal authorities. Synodal mechanisms facilitated dispute resolution, clerical discipline, and doctrinal enforcement. Provincial governors were responsible for supporting these structures while ensuring civil order, creating a dual framework of oversight integrating ecclesiastical and imperial responsibilities. Surviving records confirm continuous monitoring, reporting procedures, and administrative oversight at multiple levels. By the end of 381 AD, Nicene Christianity had achieved both doctrinal consolidation and full integration into imperial governance. The Edict of Thessalonica, combined with the decisions of the First Council of Constantinople, provided a legally codified framework for orthodoxy, episcopal authority, and ecclesiastical administration. Documentation confirms the systematic coordination between bishops and provincial authorities, the formalization of hierarchical and synodal structures, and the enforcement of doctrinal conformity through legally recognized mechanisms. The historical record demonstrates that the consolidation of Nicene Christianity under Theodosius was not dependent on anecdotal narratives or personal interpretation. Letters, edicts, synodal records, and correspondence from multiple provinces provide continuous verification of policy, administration, and enforcement. Bishops maintained records of property, clergy, and liturgical practice. Provincial governors reported adherence, and imperial authorities provided oversight, logistical support, and legal sanction. This network of documentation confirms the comprehensive, verifiable, and administratively coherent establishment of Nicene Christianity across the Roman Empire. The period from 380 to 381 AD represents the culmination of decades of doctrinal clarification, administrative development, and integration of the Church into imperial structures. Following centuries of persecution, theological disputes, and regional variation, Nicene Christianity achieved formal recognition as the official religion of the Roman Empire. Hierarchical authority, synodal governance, doctrinal codification, liturgical standardization, property administration, and legal oversight were fully operational and systematically documented. Surviving records demonstrate that these developments were implemented with administrative rigor, providing a verifiable and continuous historical narrative free from myth, hearsay, or speculative interpretation. By 381 AD, the institutional church had attained a level of organization, doctrinal clarity, and imperial recognition sufficient to function as a dominant religious authority throughout the empire. The integration of metropolitan authority, provincial oversight, and imperial sanction established enduring administrative and doctrinal patterns. Documentation from this period confirms both the historical basis of these developments and the operational mechanisms through which they were implemented, ensuring the continuity of governance, orthodoxy, and liturgical practice into subsequent centuries. The period between 305 and 381 AD represents a critical phase in the history of the Christian Church, marked by its transition from persecution to full integration with imperial authority and the consolidation of doctrinal, liturgical, and administrative structures. Documented historical sources, including imperial edicts, synodal canons, episcopal correspondence, and contemporary writings such as those of Eusebius of Caesarea, Lactantius, Athanasius of Alexandria, and surviving fragments from councils provide a continuous and verifiable record of these developments. Following the abdication of Diocletian in 305 AD, the empire experienced regional variations in the enforcement of Christian persecution. Galerius, who controlled the eastern provinces, continued limited campaigns against Christian communities, documented in surviving administrative records and correspondence with provincial governors. The persecution targeted the dismantling of Christian communal life, including the destruction of meeting spaces, the confiscation of property, and the imprisonment or execution of clergy. Western provinces, under emperors such as Constantius Chlorus, experienced less intense enforcement, as evidenced by legal records, letters from bishops, and provincial archives. The period concluded with the Edict of Tolerance issued by Galerius in 311 AD, formally allowing Christians to practice their religion, although restitution of confiscated property remained incomplete. The legalization of Christianity in 313 AD under Constantine and Licinius through the Edict of Milan represented a decisive structural and administrative turning point. Documentation, including surviving imperial edicts and letters preserved in Vita Constantini and other ecclesiastical compilations, confirms the restoration of church property, the recognition of episcopal authority, and the establishment of formal coordination between the imperial administration and the church hierarchy. Churches were reconstructed, bishops received official recognition, and public worship, previously clandestine or restricted, became legally sanctioned. This period also initiated the construction of significant ecclesiastical architecture in urban centers, including Constantinople, Rome, Antioch, and Alexandria, providing physical infrastructure for diocesan coordination and liturgical observance. The period from 318 to 325 AD saw the escalation of doctrinal disputes surrounding the nature of Christ, particularly through the teachings of Arius, an Alexandrian presbyter who posited that the Son was a created being distinct from the Father. Contemporary correspondence and preserved synodal records confirm the convening of the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD by Constantine. The council produced the Nicene Creed, affirming the consubstantiality, homoousios, of the Son with the Father and establishing a procedural precedent for the involvement of imperial authority in theological deliberation. Episcopal records document the administrative implementation of the council's decisions, including the deposition or exile of dissenting bishops, the issuance of synodal letters to subordinate clergy, and the coordination of diocesan compliance. Following Constantine's death in 337 AD, his sons, Constantius II, Constantine II, and Constans, assumed regional authority over different parts of the empire. Contemporary administrative correspondence and episcopal letters indicate that Constantius II, ruling the East, favored Arian-aligned clergy, resulting in repeated exiles and reinstatements of bishops, including Athanasius of Alexandria. Western provinces under Constantine II and Constans maintained greater adherence to Nicene orthodoxy, though regional variations persisted. Archival records confirm the systematic coordination between provincial bishops and imperial officials to regulate appointments, liturgical practice, and doctrinal enforcement, demonstrating the integration of ecclesiastical and civil administration. The foundation of Constantinople in 330 AD established a new metropolitan center for the Eastern Church. Archaeological evidence, combined with inscriptions and contemporary correspondence, documents the construction of basilicas, episcopal residences, and assembly spaces under Constantine's direction. Bishops of Constantinople assumed metropolitan authority, coordinating with Alexandria, Antioch, and Rome to standardize ecclesiastical oversight, doctrinal instruction, and liturgical practice. Letters and synodal records provide evidence of procedural oversight, including verification of episcopal conduct, approval of liturgical texts, and management of clerical appointments. Julian's reign between 361 and 363 AD represents a documented interruption of imperial support for Christianity, though surviving legal records clarify that enforcement focused on administrative measures rather than persecution. Edicts withdrew privileges from Christian clergy, removed bishops from civil offices, and redirected state resources. Provincial correspondence and administrative reports confirm compliance with Julian's directives and indicate the continued operation of ecclesiastical structures within the parameters permitted by imperial authority. Bishops maintained oversight of clergy, coordinated diocesan operations, and ensured continuity of liturgical practice, demonstrating institutional resilience. By 367 AD, the formal recognition of the New Testament canon, articulated in Athanasius of Alexandria's festal letter, provided uniformity in scriptural texts, teaching, and liturgy across the empire. Surviving letters, synodal records, and ecclesiastical correspondence confirm that bishops disseminated instructions regarding canonical texts, monitored compliance, and maintained records for metropolitan review. The canon included the four Gospels, Acts, Pauline epistles, general epistles, and Revelation, with clear administrative differentiation from non-canonical texts. These measures ensured standardized doctrinal instruction and provided the framework for subsequent ecclesiastical governance. Theodosius' Edict of Thessalonica in 380 AD legally codified Nicene Christianity as the official religion of the empire. Preserved in the Codex Theodosianus, the edict mandated adherence to Nicene doctrine, instructed governors to support episcopal authority, and established procedures for administrative enforcement. Letters from provincial authorities document the practical implementation of these measures, including verification of episcopal appointments, monitoring of clerical compliance, and coordination with metropolitan oversight. The edict marked the formal integration of ecclesiastical authority into the imperial administrative system, providing a legal basis for doctrinal enforcement and hierarchical governance. The First Council of Constantinople in 381 AD reaffirmed the Nicene Creed, formally established the divinity of the Holy Spirit, and condemned remaining Arian factions. Synodal canons, preserved in contemporary correspondence and referenced in later ecclesiastical compilations, codified procedures for episcopal oversight, property administration, liturgical standardization, and clerical discipline. Administrative measures included record-keeping of clerical appointments, verification of compliance with doctrinal standards, and reporting to metropolitan authorities. Provincial governors were instructed to support ecclesiastical authority while ensuring civil order, creating a systematic framework of dual oversight. Throughout this period, the Church's administrative infrastructure became increasingly sophisticated. Bishops maintained records of diocesan assets, clergy, and liturgical practices. Provincial correspondence confirms systematic monitoring of clergy and congregations. Synodal letters document standardized procedures for addressing disputes, enforcing doctrinal adherence, and maintaining records of property and charitable resources. Archaeological evidence, including basilicas, episcopal residences, and assembly spaces, complements documentary sources, providing material confirmation of organizational development and administrative coordination. The consolidation of Nicene Christianity also involved the integration of regional episcopal networks. Communication between Alexandria, Antioch, Constantinople, and Rome facilitated coordination of doctrine, liturgy, and clerical oversight. Synodal correspondence preserves explicit instructions regarding the implementation of canonical texts, verification of doctrinal compliance, and resolution of regional disputes. These administrative measures ensured uniformity and continuity, documented through verifiable records rather than reliance on anecdotal narratives or interpretive speculation. Fiscal and material administration of the Church was also formalized during this period. Bishops oversaw land holdings, charitable distributions, and the construction of ecclesiastical buildings under legal recognition. Correspondence between metropolitan authorities and provincial bishops specifies procedures for accounting, reporting, and oversight. These administrative practices ensured sustainable operations, traceable documentation, and continuity across episcopal jurisdictions, reflecting a systematic approach to governance. The cumulative developments between 305 and 381 AD demonstrate the transformation of the early Church from a persecuted minority to an institution fully integrated into imperial administration. Legal recognition, doctrinal codification, hierarchical organization, canonical standardization, and administrative coordination created a coherent framework for governance, worship, and instruction. Surviving imperial edicts, synodal records, episcopal correspondence, and archaeological evidence provide continuous verification of these developments, documenting both the procedural rigor and the operational effectiveness of the Church as a dominant institution within the Roman Empire. By 381 AD, the Church possessed the structures necessary for long-term doctrinal, liturgical, and administrative stability. Metropolitan authorities coordinated regional oversight. Synodal mechanisms facilitated dispute resolution and governance, and imperial sanction provided legal authority for enforcement. The recognition of the New Testament canon, the establishment of the Nicene Creed, and the formalization of hierarchical and fiscal administration ensured continuity of practice and belief across provinces. Documentation confirms that these developments were systematically implemented, verifiable, and sustainable, forming the foundation for the Church's subsequent expansion and influence in both eastern and western regions of the empire. The legacy of the period from 305 to 381 AD is therefore measurable in both administrative and doctrinal terms. The integration of episcopal authority into imperial governance, the establishment of canonical texts, the standardization of liturgical and doctrinal practice, and the creation of verifiable administrative procedures collectively ensured the Church's transformation into a dominant, organized institution. Records from councils, synodal correspondence, episcopal letters, and imperial edicts provide a continuous and verifiable historical narrative, confirming the Church's operational and doctrinal consolidation without reliance on myth, legend, or hearsay.